All right. So today we do have a special guest on, Elaine Brewster, and she does have a podcast, which we'll be talking about in just a minute, but also has a book out. And we're going to just talk about the book, Scott's Choice, if you want to get it in bookstores on her website at elainebrewster.org, O-R-G. You can get it there or at any other bookstores. Elaine, through a lot of people having a lot of pain, mentally, physically, emotionally. It's great to have you on to tell about your story in the book, also speak about the podcast and everything else in the kitchen sink. So we are grateful to have you on, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me. And I love it that you are interested in so many different things in psychology and personal development, things that can really help our society nowadays.
Yeah, well, don't get me started. Our country is in shambles. It's leaderless. It's really depressing in general, but that's another story for another day. I do want the viewers to learn more about you, Elaine. So can you tell the viewers at the start of our broadcast here a little bit about you and your journey?
Okay, thanks. I'm a singing teacher. I'm a mother of 6, a grandmother of 18. I'm a family history buff, and I have been involved with alternative health for 25 years. And of course, I wrote this book, and then along with the book, then I have this podcast that I do every Friday where we delve a little bit deeper into aspects of the book, aspects of health.
So I do want to get into the book and some issues that are going on in our country and our world today. But let's firstly get in the book because that's why we're here. Scott's Choice. Again, if you do want to get the book, elainebrewster.org, definitely check it out. So many other things besides the book on the website, including a link to the podcast, and you can watch that on Zoom. But regardless of that, can you talk about Scott's Choice and how it came about?
It came about because he had an all alternative cancer journey. Yeah. And it was just frankly so unusual that anytime people would ask me and I would answer with just one little bit, their eyebrows would go up to the ceiling and they would say, "Whoa, you should write a book." And so I finally did. It was the only way to really encompass and really tell people what was going on. And it starts with alternatives, lots of natural health, holistic healing things, and that goes into energy work, which also energy work always involves what you're thinking. It involves your paradigms and the way you act. Somebody said the way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Right.
And so ultimately, though, then it leads to being spiritual and being aligned with God and trusting the Lord and doing what he felt God needed to do. So actually, my book ended up being body, mind, spirit, all 3 of those.
So can you talk about Scott's journey? How it happened as far as the cancer issue and how you got through it, because obviously it was extremely painful for him mentally, physically, emotionally to go through this crisis, which obviously you didn't think was going to happen. Neither did he, but also the pain as a wife going through that, worrying about what's going to happen with the kids. How are they going to take this? The grandkids growing up without a grandfather and losing that time, or if that time could be shortened because of this illness. So all these things are going through your mind. So how did you get through this? Take us through this journey.
My husband, in one early December, he had this pain in his right side, and he said, "Oh, I could hardly sleep last night. We need to go to the hospital so they can prescribe something." Well, they said, "We're not just going to give you something. We need to do a CAT scan and figure out what this is." And they came back and they said, because my husband had a blood clotting issue that 5% of Americans have. And they said, "Well, it's good. It's not a blood clot." And he's going, "Whoo." And then they said, "But there is something sitting on your liver that shouldn't be there." Yeah. And so that's where it started. And that just threw us for a loop. And he did all the Western medicine kind of things, CAT scan, MRIs, biopsy, and they just kept being inconclusive. And meanwhile, we were doing alternative things because, like I say, we were already in alternative medicine dealing with natural holistic healing methods. And so we have this huge network of people that we could rely on. And one of them was a physicist who lived in Maryland. And so we started doing what he was doing, because it turned out he had cancer too. And so my part of the journey was to research and find things for him to do so that he felt like he had no rock unturned. And, and then theoretically his job was to get better. Now, one of the reasons I wrote this book and called it Scott's Choice is because right within the very first week, the Spirit spoke to me and said, Scott will make a choice. Once chosen, it will be irrevocable. And so right at the beginning of the book, I tell people from the number 2 thinker in America, according to a Harvard study, Clayton Christensen, exactly how to tell the Spirit, is it your mind or is it God speaking to you? And so I address that right in the beginning of the book, because if you're gonna go with me on that premise that my husband had a choice, you have to realize this is not your own brain. And I have several examples in there showing that. And so that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, because all of these natural healing things, they worked for other people, and they actually were working for my husband. His cancer really was going away, but then he went away too. And that was his choice. And some people I have found are given a choice whether to stay on this earth or to move on. Some people I think aren't. I think maybe when people are in a car accident, that's just too fast. They're gone.
Yeah.
And they go, whoa, where am I? And other people are given a choice. And I show that in the book also. One gal, 2 ladies who were given choices. One was 18 years old, one was 32, and one chose to move on and the other chose to come back. And so the 18-year-old left the earth at 18. The 32-year-old came back, and I think she was 91 when she just finally died, like last year.
I want to end on the podcast. So I know you do have a podcast that comes up quite often. Can you tell the viewers about that, what you discuss, and where they can find it?
Well, right before COVID, I had this idea that, well, we opened this new rec center, beautiful rec center in my town.
Okay.
And so I went to it, and they have a senior room that's just for older people, and they had the water aerobics, and and they had all these nice programs. But what they didn't have anything teaching people about natural health products, which is what I've dealt with, I said, for this year, 25 years. And so I went to them and said, I could give you a class every week. And if I don't know it, I know people who do. And so I can teach you about magnets and far infrared and oils and, and all these things, Reiki and PACE and brain gym. And they didn't have room for me on their schedule. And so they couldn't put me in. And then COVID came and the place was locked down anyway.
Yeah.
And so my little brain said, oh, you could do that on Zoom and have your own classes. And so each one of the classes, actually, it probably has something to do with the book, but it allows us to get into it. They're usually about a half hour, a little bit longer. So it allows us to get into it a little bit deeper, have a deeper dive. And we talk about energy work, natural healing, sometimes just people who make a difference. One of the gals that I met on the Publicity Summit has written a whole lot about China. And
who's that?
Rachel Winston.
Yes, I know Rachel very well. She's been on twice. She's very good.
Nice, she is. And yeah, her show has gotten some of the most views of any of mine.
Yeah, she's great.
God, death, healing, caregiving. A lot of people are concerned about caregiving, and just, and
Mhm.
maybe that's another program, but just to answer a question that you had 10 minutes ago, because the spirit had told me he had a choice, and because my husband said he wanted to live, I never thought he would die. So I actually wasn't worried.
Mhm.
So when I saw him take his last breath, it was like someone had pulled out the rug from under my feet. I went, where did this come from? You said you wanted to live, and then you process a lot of things after a loved one's death. But also I knew that he was paying attention to what God wanted him to do. And if God needs him on the other side for whatever reasons they have, I
Yeah.
have to feel good about that. And, and I believe in the resurrection. That's the biggest thing. He will live again. You will live again. I will live again. That really, really does take the sting out of death. Sure, I miss him every night,
Mhm.
but the sting isn't there.
Yeah. So what time and days of the podcast?
It's at 1:00 Pacific time on Friday.
Okay. And people can go to the website then just to get locked in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we'll direct you again, ElaineBrewster.org. I believe it's at the bottom of the screen. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Elaine, where all that information is. I'm pretty sure about that, but
Okay.
I,
It's Brewster,
right.
the English spelling.
Um, maybe it's not at the bottom of the screen. Well, you can subscribe on the website, and I'm sure all that stuff will come about. Just click on the Aspects podcast, and once you click on that, then it should direct you to the right spot. Again, ElaineBrewster.org. Elaine, as we end, and I've teased the website, teased the podcast, we've teased the book. I'd love to have you on again to speak about many different issues. Anything you want to leave the viewers for maybe a little bit of hope? I know there's not too much hope going on in the world right now because we live in very crazy times, but can you leave the audience rather with a little bit of hope? Sorry about that.
I can. Thank you. And I love that word. There, especially with cancer, but with other chronic illnesses too, there are so many times that the doctor comes to the patient and says, I'm sorry, we don't have anything for you. And every now and then I've said something really good in my book. And I like this sentence where it said, and according to what they know, they're right. They don't. But there is hope often in going somewhere else and going outside in some of these natural things. And natural is not a panacea, and everybody is complex. Everybody is unique and different. But there's for cancer, there's a clinic. Mine that I went to was closed, but there's a cancer clinic now called Immune Therapy Center down in Tijuana.
Mhm.
And you go to them even with a stage 4 cancer, and they look at you and say, okay, here's Angela or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we think that these things would help Angela. And so those are the things that they work on. They have 25 choices. They don't just have 3 choices, radiation, chemo, and surgery. They have 25 choices, and don't tell me that different kinds of chemo is all kinds of different kinds. No, it's poisoning the whole body. And so they do a lot of different things. And in that, well, and that's one of you can see my stuff on YouTube. It's Aspects of Energy, and then look at my name, and then look at this one on the Immune Center from Dr. Carlos Bautista. And you just hear from his tone of voice, these are the things we're working on. This gives hope.
Mhm.
Saying you don't have choices is what takes away hope.
Right. Well, you give us hope with your story. And again, we hope that people go to ElaineBrewster.com and buy the book. So, Elaine, thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate your time. Let's do this again down the road.
Amen. Fun to be with you.